Hey, it's number one. What? No, there we go. I think you're gonna get a lot of her set. Whoops. I think you're gonna get a lot out of I think you're gonna get. Shoot, we're running out of steam's battery. Here we go. Welcome to today's 7 Super Tips. I am your host, Erik Qualman. A lot of you know me as Equalman. Super pumped to have Meg Whitman on today's show. She's one of the top CEOs of this century. Without further ado, here are 7 super tips from Meg Whitman.
So my encouragement to you is to be the men and women who stand up for free speech, who welcome debate, who model for others what genuine dialogue is, and who are not afraid to have your beliefs challenged. Too many of us live in intellectual silos, where we seek out people and information that simply reinforces our existing opinions. Venture out of those silos. We are better when we are exposed to different ideas and competing philosophies.
The one thing that you have in your career is your reputation. What do you stand for? Howard Schultz, who is the founder and CEO of Starbucks, sat on my board at eBay, and we had one very difficult decision that we had to make. And I'll tell you that decision. Back at eBay, we were really run by largely a libertarian perspective. If the item or the category of goods was legal for sale in the country in which we were doing business, then it was legal for sale on eBay. And Howard Schultz came to one board meeting and he said, you know, Meg, I'm deeply concerned that there is Nazi memorabilia for sale on eBay. So it turns out that Nazi memorabilia is perfectly legal for sale in the United States. It is not legal for sale in Germany. It's not legal for sale in France. It's not legal for sale in many countries. But in the United States, it is legal for sale. And so Nazi memorabilia was legal for sale on eBay. And he said, Meg, I just think this isn't the right thing to do. And Jeff Skoll, who was Pierre Omidyar's co-founder, actually took the opposite point of view. He said, but it's a slippery slope. You know, if you ban Nazi memorabilia, then what's the next thing that you have to ban? And what does that lead you into? And Howard said, I don't know. I know I can solve this problem. And he looked at me and he said, Meg, what do you want the character of the company to be? And in the end, we decided to ban Nazi memorabilia. We decided to ban firearms, tobacco, alcohol. I mean, we then got into a situation of making judgment calls about things that we wanted to ban. But the guiding principle is, what's the character of the company? And it was an incredibly instructive lesson for the company, and it set us on an entirely different path. In the end, who you are, what you stand for, when the going gets tough, do you do the right thing? And I would encourage you to do that. Because while it may be inconvenient, while you may lose your job, while you may have to leave the company you're working for, in the end, it is who you are and it is your reputation. And the only thing you take with you through your career is your reputation. And the people that you meet on the way up are the same people you meet on the way down. And so I think the other last bit of advice in addition to character is, you know what, treat other people like you would like to be treated. And always extend that helping hand because it will come back to you.
Civility is more than nice manners. It's a precondition of democratic dialogue, in the words of Professor Stephen L. Carter of Yale Law School. Civility is part of the, quote, etiquette of democracy, unquote. It allows for genuine social interaction. It's been said that the true genius of Martin Luther King Jr. was not his ability to argue the pain of an oppressed people, but his ability to inspire those very people to be loving and civil in their dissent. We should treat each other with civility, not because we agree with others, but because it is a measure of our respect for human dignity. It's what we owe all people, including those with whom we have fierce disagreements. Our institutions, our culture, our communities cannot be sustained, let alone thrive, if civility is eroded.
In a tech company, that means you have to celebrate the engineers. In an animation company, you have to celebrate the animators. In a fashion design company, you have to celebrate the fashion designers. And by the way, they're all, in many respects, quite similar. They just happen to have a different domain of creativity. The creatives at HP are the engineers. And so you have to recognize that Celebrate that. And then you have to give the engineers or the fashion designers or the animators, you have to give them a bit of a sandbox. In other words, it's not good to say, okay, go do whatever you want. You've got to say, hey, listen, here's the market that we're going after. Here's the customer need. Here's what we think is going to be happening in the environment. And then you set them off. And in almost any industry, it's actually magical what you get if you give them, some parameters. Not a box this big, but enough to be really creative. So probably most of you know, and you know this, that changing culture at companies is the most difficult thing that you do because cultures are very entrenched. So my view is we had to have, what are the key things that we're going to stand for? And we talked about that before. Innovators at heart, corporate social responsibility, and we'll do anything for customers. And then you have to say, what are the things that are getting in the way of us being a great company? And for Hewlett-Packard, one of the things getting in our way was sense of urgency and jumping on the problems. And I think it's because, listen, when customers have problems or there's hard problems to be solved, sometimes people back away from those challenges. Who wants to go see a customer that's, not particularly happy with you? But if you run to the fire, I promise you, these problems do not get better with age. It's not like fine wine. You've got to run to the fire. And so we had a couple of things that we really focused on. Run to the fire was one. Another was escalate the problems in 24 hours and resolve them in 48. And we gave permission to escalate right to me. And the culture was not a great thing to escalate over your boss, because your boss would not be happy that you had told your boss's boss that there was a problem. We had to completely change the culture, which is if you did not escalate, then that was the problem. And this is now washing nicely through Hewlett-Packard because we didn't punish people for escalating, we actually celebrated them. I don't know that I can be the perfect CEO, the perfect wife, the perfect mother, the perfect hostess, and have my house look fabulous all the time. I mean, that's a lot for one person. And finally, I sort of gave up the notion that I could be perfect at all those things. It was a little bit like triage in an emergency room. What's the most important thing? I said, I'm going to focus on the children, my husband, and my job. And everything else is going to have to go. You just have to kind of figure out what's most important, what you're good at, what you can let go of. And I think that's the only way to manage all of this. It's very tempting when you join a new organization. It doesn't have to be a business. You join a new not-for-profit or join the board of a company. You tend to, your instinct is to look for what is going wrong and then be helpful in trying to fix it. I had quite the opposite idea. eBay, when I joined it, was growing at 70% compound monthly growth rate, meaning every month the company was 70% bigger than the month before. So my instinct, instead of finding out what was wrong, I said, what are we doing really well, and can we do more of that? And so I really focused on what was going really well, how do we do more of it, and how do we grow the organization, which is very unusual when CEOs come into organizations. And I will say the 30 people that worked at eBay, I think felt very, in some ways, validated that I wanted to see what was going right as opposed to what was going wrong.
Well, I hope you got a lot out of today's 7 super tips from Meg Whitman. Remember, this show's all around giving 7 super tips from some of the top thought leaders in the world. And my hope is that it helps you unlock and unleash your inner superpower. Until next time, this is Equalman reminding all of us it's not what we take from the world, it's what we leave behind.